She came to his well with nothing more than a thirst to quench, but left with a place at his table and a claim on his heart. And it makes you wonder, how can one drink of water change the course of two lives forever? Picture this. It's the summer of 1884 the New Mexico Territory, where the sun beats down like a hammer on an anvil, and water is more precious than gold. The settlement of Dry Creek Bluff sits between towering mesas and winding canyons, a place where only the toughest souls dare to scratch out a living from the unforgiving earth. Rhett Calloway stands at his windmill pump, the rhythmic creak of metal, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of the afternoon. Sweat beads on his weathered brow as he fills barrel after barrel with the precious liquid that keeps his ranch alive. At 35, he learned that survival means planning for drought, planning for hardship, planning for solitude. That's when he sees her. A lone rider emerges from the heat shimmer, like a mirage made real. Her horse stumbles, lathered and trembling, its flanks heaving with exhaustion. The woman in the saddle sits straight, despite her obvious fatigue, but Rhett can see the desperation in the way she urges her mount forward those final yards to his well. "Water!" she calls out, her voice raspy as sandpaper. "Please, I can pay." She dismounts with careful precision, her legs nearly buckling as her boots hit the ground. Dust coats her traveling dress like a second skin, and her dark hair has escaped its pins to frame a face marked by exhaustion and something else, something that looks like fear. Rhett doesn't hesitate. He fills a tin cup from his freshest barrel and hands it to her, watching as she drinks with the desperate gratitude of someone who's been dancing with death under the desert Sunday. When she reaches for her coin purse, he waves her away. "Keep your money," he says simply. "Water's free to anyone who needs it." As she tends to her horse, Rhett notices things. The fine quality of her dress beneath all that dust. The way her hands shake slightly as she works not from weakness, but from nerves. Most telling of all, the way she keeps glancing back over her shoulder, as if expecting to see pursuit rising from the heat waves behind her. This isn't just a traveler passing through. This is a woman running from something. She lingers by the well longer than necessary, her green eyes taking in every detail of his ranch, the sturdy house, the well-maintained corrals, the isolation that stretches for miles in every direction. When she finally looks at him directly, Rhett sees intelligence there, and determination, and a weariness that goes bone deep. "Thank you," she says, her voice steadier now. I haven't found such kindness in quite some time." There's a story in those words, Rhett realizes. A story she's not ready to tell, but one that's written in the careful way she moves, the guarded set of her shoulders, the quick scan she gives the horizon even as they speak. The afternoon sun beats down mercilessly, and Rhett finds himself making an offer he hasn't extended to another soul in years. "Shades cooler by the house," he says. "You and your horse both look like you could use some rest. If you thought that was intense, just wait until you see what dangerous secrets she's been running from." The weeks that follow their impromptu wedding settle into a rhythm that surprises them both with its natural ease. Marilla proves herself to be everything she'd promised and more, an excellent cook who can make hearty, satisfying meals from the simplest ingredients, a diligent housekeeper who transforms Rhett's sparse bachelor quarters into something approaching a real home, and a capable ranch hand who's not afraid to get her hands dirty with whatever work needs doing. She manages the water barrels with the skill of someone who understands that every drop is precious in this harsh country. She tends his small vegetable garden with patience and knowledge, coaxing life from reluctant soil with techniques she must have learned elsewhere but doesn't talk about. She even helps with the livestock, moving among the cattle and horses with confidence that speaks of experience. But it's the small moments that begin to matter most to Rhett. The way she hums while she works, unconscious melodies that drift through the house like gentle breezes. The sight of her hair escaping its pins as she hangs laundry, catching the morning light like spun gold. The sound of her laughter when one of his horses proves particularly stubborn, or when a chicken escapes the coop and leads them on a chase through the sagebrush. They develop unspoken routines, natural divisions of labor that maximize efficiency while respecting each other's strengths. Rhett handles the heavier ranch work, repairing fence, managing the larger animals, maintaining equipment. Marilla takes charge of the domestic sphere, but also proves surprisingly adept at tasks like treating minor injuries in the livestock and keeping detailed records of supplies and expenses. In the evenings, they sit on the porch as the desert heat finally breaks, sharing observations about the day's work or comfortable silences that no longer feel awkward. Sometimes Marilla reads aloud from books she's discovered among Rhett's modest library: poetry, adventure stories, agricultural journals that somehow become interesting when filtered through her voice. "You're better educated than you let on," Rhett observes one evening after she's finished reading a complex treatise on water rights law. Marilla closes the book carefully, as if buying time to formulate her response. "My father believed in education for his daughters as well as his sons," she says finally. "He said knowledge was the one thing no one could take away from you." It's another piece of her puzzle, and Rhett files it away with the others. An educated woman from a family with resources, running from something that forced her to abandon everything familiar. The picture is becoming clearer, even if she's not ready to share the complete story. But despite the growing comfort between them, Rhett notices that Marilla still checks the horizon frequently, particularly in the mornings and evenings when visibility is best. She wakes sometimes in the night. He can hear her, moving around the house, checking locks, peering out windows. She's settling into their arrangement, but she hasn't stopped watching for trouble. "How long do you think they'll keep looking?" he asks one evening, breaking their comfortable silence. Marilla doesn't pretend not to know what he's talking about. "I don't know," she admits. "They're persistent, and they don't like being told no." "Want to tell me what they think you owe them?" She's quiet for so long that Rhett thinks she won't answer. Then, just as he's about to apologize for prying, she speaks. "My hand in marriage," she says simply. "To a man I wouldn't marry if he were the last person on earth. A man who thinks a woman's consent is optional if the financial arrangements are attractive enough." The pieces click into place with brutal clarity. An arranged marriage, probably with significant financial incentives for her family. A woman educated enough to understand her legal options and strong enough to refuse them. Men pursuing her not out of love or even desire, but out of wounded pride and financial interest. "Your family supports this arrangement?" Marilla's laugh is bitter as alkali water. "My family arranged it. They see it as a practical solution to several problems: my unmarried status, their financial difficulties, and their business relationship with his family." "And your opinion on the matter?" Apparently irrelevant. Rhett leads Marilla into his modest adobe house, expecting to prepare the same simple bachelor fare he's been cooking for himself for years. But she surprises him by taking off her dusty jacket and rolling up her sleeves. "Let me," she says, surveying his sparse kitchen with the practiced eye of someone who's made many meals from meager ingredients. "It's the least I can do for your hospitality." Rhett wants to protest. She's his guest, after all, but something in her manner tells him that cooking is as much for her benefit as his. She needs to feel useful, needed, capable, so he settles for providing ingredients and watching as she transforms his bachelor pantry into something approaching a feast. She works with quiet efficiency, seasoning salt, pork, and beans with wild herbs she produces from her own saddlebags, mixing cornbread with hands that clearly know their way around a kitchen. As she cooks, the tension in her shoulders gradually eases, and Rhett catches glimpses of the woman she might be when she's not looking over her shoulder for trouble. "You're a good cook," he observes as the aroma of seasoned beans fills the small kitchen. "My mother's teaching," Marilla replies. Then her face clouds slightly. "She always said a woman should be able to make a home wherever she finds herself. It's the first personal detail she's shared, and Rhett files it away carefully. A mother who taught practical skills. A woman raised to be adaptable, independent. The pieces of Marilla Dane's puzzle are starting to form a picture, even if he can't see the whole image yet. Over supper, they share fragments of their lives like trading cards. Rhett tells her about the ranch, how he'd bought it cheap from a man who'd given up on the desert, how he'd spent 5 years coaxing life from reluctant soil and learning to read the sky for signs of the rare, precious rain. It's hard country, he admits, cutting into the cornbread that's better than any he's ever made himself. But honest country. It doesn't lie to you about what it requires. Marilla nods, as if she understands completely. I've found that the hardest places often make the strongest people, she says, though sometimes the cost of that strength is higher than we'd like to pay. When Rhett asks about her own background, she becomes vague again. She mentions a situation back in my valley that required leaving quickly. She talks about obligations that became complicated, without explaining what those obligations might have been. But as the evening settles around them, like a comfortable blanket, her guard drops incrementally. She laughs at his story about a stubborn bull that took 3 men and a rope to convince it belonged in the corral. She shares her own tale of a chicken that terrorized grown men until she figured out it was protecting a nest of eggs. The sun disappears behind the western mountains, leaving the desert painted in shades of purple and silver. The scent of mesquite smoke drifts through the open windows, mixing with the lingering aroma of their shared meal. I should see to my horse, Marilla says finally, though she makes no immediate move to rise from the table. Already done, Rhett tells her. Fed and watered while you were cooking. Figured it was fair trade. She looks surprised, then grateful. Thank you. That's very kind. You're welcome to use the bunkhouse tonight, Rhett offers, trying to keep his tone casual. It's clean and private, and your horse could use the rest even if you couldn't. Marilla hesitates, and Rhett can practically see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide if accepting his hospitality puts her in more danger or less. Finally, she nods. Just for tonight, she says. I'll be gone with first light. But even as she says it, Rhett suspects she's not entirely convinced. And if he's being honest with himself, he hopes she's not. Rhett wakes before dawn, as he has every day for the past decade. The desert air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of sage and the distant promise of another scorching day. But as he steps onto his porch with his first cup of coffee, something in the eastern distance catches his eye. Dust trails, thin wisps rising against the pale morning sky, moving in a deliberate line across the desert floor. Riders, at least 3 of them, heading in the general direction of his ranch. More telling still, they're coming from the same direction Marilla had arrived from yesterday. He finds her already at the well, dressed in clothes she must have borrowed from the bunkhouse, one of his old work shirts and a pair of pants that had belonged to the last hired hand. The clothes are too big for her slight frame, but she's rolled the sleeves and cuffs with practical efficiency. Morning, he says, keeping his tone light, despite the tension coiling in his gut. Morning, she replies, but her eyes are already scanning the horizon with the same wariness he's noticed since her arrival. I was just drawing water for the trail. I'll be out of your way shortly. Rhett takes a sip of his coffee, studying her over the rim of his cup. Anyone likely to come looking for you? The question hangs between them like smoke from a gun barrel. Marilla's hands still on the rope she's been pulling, and for a moment, her carefully constructed composure cracks just enough for him to see the fear underneath. Why do you ask? She says finally. Dust trails to the east. Could be nothing travelers, cowboys moving cattle, but they're coming from the direction you rode in from, and they seem to have purpose. Marilla straightens slowly, her face going pale beneath its coating of desert tan. She shades her eyes with one hand and squints toward the horizon, though the riders are still too far away to make out clearly. How many? She asks, her voice carefully controlled. 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell from this distance. She nods, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. They're persistent, I'll give them that. They? For a moment, Rhett thinks she might finally tell him what she's running from. Her mouth opens, then closes, and she turns away to resume drawing water with jerky, agitated movements. Just. People who don't understand that no means no, she says finally. People who think a woman's choices aren't really choices if they don't happen to agree with them. It's more information than she's given him yet, and it paints a picture that makes Rhett's jaw tighten with anger. He's known men like that, men who think women are property to be claimed, decisions to be overruled, wills to be broken. The kind of men who pursue what they want with the relentless determination of predators tracking wounded prey. How long have they been following you? 3 days, maybe 4. I thought I'd lost them when I crossed the river north of here, but, she shrugs, trying to appear nonchalant, and failing completely. The dust trails are closer now, close enough for Rhett to make out individual riders. They're moving with the steady pace of men who know where they're going, and aren't in any particular hurry to get there. The pace of hunters who've cornered their quarry. Marilla, Rhett says quietly, whatever trouble you're in, whatever brought you here, you don't have to face it alone. She looks at him sharply, searching his face for hidden motives or false promises. You don't even know me, she says. You don't know what I've done, what I'm running from. For all you know, I could be a thief, or a murderer, or… Are you? No, but… Then it doesn't matter. Rhett says simply, I can read people well enough to know the difference between predator and prey, and I've never been inclined to let wolves run down rabbits on my land. The midday heat shimmers off the desert floor like ripples on water, but Rhett barely notices as he mends fence posts with methodical precision. His mind is occupied with the problem of Marilla Dane and the riders, who are undoubtedly getting closer with each passing hour. He's been alone on this ranch for 5 years, answering to no one, responsible for nothing but his livestock and his own survival. It's been a peaceful existence, if a lonely one. But something about Marilla's situation has awakened protective instincts he thought he'd buried along with his past. She approaches him while he's wrestling with a particularly stubborn post. Her borrowed clothes dusty from helping with morning chores she'd insisted on completing despite his protests. Mr. Calloway, she says, her voice carrying an odd formality that immediately puts him on alert. I'd like to propose a business arrangement. Rhett straightens, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. What kind of arrangement? Marilla takes a deep breath, squaring her shoulders like a woman preparing to negotiate the sale of her soul. I'm a good cook, as you saw last night. I can clean, tend livestock, manage a household. I know herbs for healing, can sew and mend, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm listening. I could stay on as your housekeeper. You'd provide room and board. I'd provide labor. It would be a fair trade. You need help with the domestic side of running this place, and I need… She gestures vaguely toward the horizon where their pursuers are no doubt drawing closer. I need a place to disappear for a while. It's a reasonable proposal, and Rhett finds himself considering it seriously. The ranch does require more work than one man can easily handle, and Marilla has already proven herself capable and resourceful. But he suspects there's more to her offer than simple domestic employment. And if those riders show up asking questions about a woman traveling alone, Marilla's composure cracks slightly, revealing the desperation she's been trying so hard to conceal. They're looking for someone they can intimidate, someone they can drag back to face consequences for disappointing them. They're not looking for someone who belongs somewhere, someone who's chosen to be here. Rhett sets down his hammer, giving her his full attention. What exactly are you suggesting? The words seem to stick in her throat for a moment, but she forces them out with the grim determination of someone making a final gamble, if it would make things. Cleaner. Legally speaking, you could call me your wife. The proposal hits Rhett like a physical blow. Marriage. He'd considered it once, years ago, before circumstances had taught him that some men are meant to walk alone. The idea of binding himself to another person, of taking responsibility for someone else's welfare and happiness, seems both terrifying and oddly appealing. You're talking about a marriage of convenience, he says carefully. A business arrangement with legal papers. Exactly. Marilla's relief at his understanding is palpable. Nothing more than that. Just protection. For both of us, in different ways. Rhett studies her face, noting the way she holds herself perfectly still while waiting for his answer, as if any movement might shatter her carefully constructed composure. She's offering herself as a commodity again, not sold this time, but traded, bartered, arranged for mutual benefit. But there's something in her eyes that suggests this proposal costs her more than she's willing to admit. Pride, perhaps. Or hope for something different, something real, something she's convinced herself she doesn't deserve. Those men following you, Rhett says slowly, they the type to respect a marriage certificate? They're the type to respect another man's claim. Marilla replies with bitter honesty. They see women as property, but they understand property law. A husband's rights would carry more weight than a woman's wishes. It's a ugly truth, but truth nonetheless. Rhett has known men like that. Men who view women as livestock, to be owned, rather than people to be respected. The kind of men who might pursue a runaway woman across hundreds of miles of desert, but would think twice about stealing another man's wife. This arrangement, Rhett says carefully, what would it mean for you? Day to day, I mean. I'd keep house, cook, help with the ranch work. You'd provide protection and legitimacy. We'd be partners, I suppose. Practical partners. Rhett nods slowly, considering all the angles, all the complications, all the ways this could go wrong. But when he looks at Marilla, really looks at her, he sees something that makes his decision easier than it should be. He sees a woman worth protecting. The tiny church in Dry Creek Bluff has seen its share of desperate ceremonies, hasty weddings, before cavalry deployments, deathbed marriages to legitimize children, unions born of necessity rather than romance. But even by those standards, the wedding of Rhett Calloway and Marilla Dane feels surreal. Parson Mitchell, a weathered man who's learned not to ask too many questions about the motivations of his parishioners, performs the ceremony with efficient professionalism. His wife serves as witness alongside two of Rhett's ranch hands men, who've ridden into town on other business, and seem more puzzled than pleased by their boss's sudden matrimony. Marilla wears her traveling dress, cleaned as best she could manage, and pressed with a hot iron borrowed from the parson's wife. Rhett has donned his cleanest shirt and the tie he hasn't worn since the last funeral he attended. They stand side by side before the simple wooden altar, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. Do you, Rhett James Calloway, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do, Rhett says, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he's agreeing to. Do you, Marilla Rose Dane, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? Marilla hesitates for just a moment, so briefly that anyone not watching closely might miss it before answering. I do. By the power vested in me, by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The parson closes his Bible and looks expectantly at the newlyweds. When neither moves to kiss, he clears his throat diplomatically. You may seal your union with a kiss if you so choose. Rhett and Marilla look at each other for a long moment. There's something charged in the air between them, something that has nothing to do with their practical arrangement and everything to do with the way she's looking at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Instead of a kiss, Rhett extends his hand. Marilla takes it, and they shake solemnly, like business partners concluding a successful negotiation. But the contact lasts longer than strictly necessary, and when their hands finally separate, Rhett can still feel the warmth of her skin against his palm. The paperwork is signed, witnessed, and filed with territorial authorities. Mrs. Rhett Calloway now exists in the eyes of the law, with all the protections and obligations that status entails. They walk back toward Rhett's wagon in silence, both lost in their own thoughts about what they've just committed themselves to. "Any regrets?" Rhett asks as he helps her into the wagon seat. Marilla considers the question seriously. "Ask me again in a month," she says finally, though I suspect any regrets will be outweighed by the alternatives. As they drive back to the ranch, their ranch now, legally speaking, the silence between them feels different than it had before, more complicated, weighted with new responsibilities and unexpected possibilities. They're married now, bound together by law, if not by choice, and that changes everything. Even if they've agreed, it changes nothing. But when Marilla glances at him sideways, Rhett catches something in her expression that looks almost like relief. Not just the relief of escaping whatever was pursuing her, but something deeper. The relief of someone who's been carrying a burden alone for too long, and suddenly finds herself with a partner willing to help shoulder the load. "Thank you," she says quietly, as the ranch buildings come into view. "I know this isn't what you planned when you woke up this morning." "Plans are overrated," Rhett replies. "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming." Neither of them acknowledges the implication in those words, but the silence that follows feels comfortable rather than awkward. They're married now, for better or worse, and whatever comes next, they'll face it together. Marilla Dane, though she hasn't offered her name yet, hesitates for a long moment before accepting Rhett's invitation. She leads her exhausted horse to the shade of his adobe house, her movements careful and controlled despite her obvious fatigue. "I'm Rhett Calloway," he offers, settling onto the wooden bench he built years ago for evenings, when the desert air finally cooled enough to sit outside. "Marilla," she replies after a pause, as if even sharing her first name requires careful consideration. She doesn't offer a surname, and Rhett doesn't press. As she sits beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, Rhett finds himself studying her with the eye of a man who's learned to read people and situations quickly. Her hands are work-roughened, calloused from labor, but there's something about her posture that speaks of refinement. The way she holds her shoulders, the careful enunciation of her words, the quality of her traveling boots, despite their current dust-covered state. "Long ride?" he asks, keeping his tone conversational. "Long enough," she answers, then deflects with a question of her own. "This is quite a spread you have here. Must take considerable work to maintain, especially with the drought." Rhett nods, accepting her evasion for now. "Water's everything out here. That windmill's been the difference between prosperity and poverty more times than I can count." They sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the heat waves dance across the desert floor. But when a coyote calls in the distance, a lonesome sound that echoes off the canyon walls, Marilla's entire body tenses. Her hand moves instinctively toward her saddlebag, and Rhett catches the telltale bulge of a concealed weapon. She notices his observation and forces herself to relax, but the damage is done. Whatever brought her to his doorstep, she's prepared to fight her way out of it. "Are you expecting trouble?" Rhett asks quietly. Marilla's laugh is brittle as dried leaves. Trouble has a way of finding people, doesn't it? Whether they expect it or not. It's not really an answer, but it tells him everything he needs to know. This woman is running scared, armed for bear, and trying her best to appear calm, while her world falls apart around her. Rhett recognizes the signs because he's worn them himself. Different circumstances, same bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying burdens too heavy for one person's shoulders. "Where are you headed?" he tries again. West, she says, which could mean anywhere from California to the Pacific Ocean. Any particular destination in mind? Wherever the road takes me. Rhett lets the silence stretch between them, filled only by the distant groan of his windmill and the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. He's not a man who pries into other people's business. Lord knows he values his own privacy too much for that. But something about Marilla Dane draws his curiosity like a moth to flame. She's beautiful, certainly, in a way that's been tempered by hardship and polished by determination. But it's more than that. There's a strength in her that recognizes the strength in him, a shared understanding of what it means to face the world alone and refuse to break under the weight of it. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Rhett makes another decision that surprises him. I was about to start supper, he says. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty for two, if you'd care to join me. Marilla turns to study his face, as if searching for hidden motives or ulterior purposes. Whatever she sees there must satisfy her, because she nods slowly. I'd like that, she says. It's been a while since I shared a meal with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. The riders appear in the late afternoon when the sun hangs low and merciless over the western mountains. 3 dark figures wavering in the heat shimmer, like demons rising from the desert floor. Rhett spots them first. He's been watching for them, truth be told, every day since his marriage to Marilla, and the sight of them sends ice through his veins, despite the blazing heat. Marilla is hanging laundry behind the house, but something in Rhett's stillness must alert her, because she drops the shirt she's been pinning to the line and moves to stand beside him at the well. Her face goes pale as she sees what he's looking at. It's them, she says, and her voice is steady, but he can see her hands trembling. You sure? I'd know them anywhere. She takes a shaky breath. The one in front is Marcus Whitmore. He's the one my father wants me to marry. Rhett nods, already calculating angles and distances. Go inside. Get my shotgun from over the fireplace. She hesitates for just a moment, then moves with quick efficiency toward the house. Rhett remains at the well, his posture relaxed but ready, watching as the 3 riders approach. They rein in about 20 yards away, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid seeming immediately threatening. The man in front is everything Rhett expected, well-dressed despite the travel dust, soft-looking in the way of men who've never missed a meal, carrying himself with arrogant confidence. Marcus Whitmore, future husband, whether Marilla consents or not. Afternoon, Whitmore calls out, his tone friendly, but his eyes cold as winter stones. I'm looking for a woman who might have passed through here. Dark hair, about 25, riding alone, goes by the name of Marilla Dane. Can't say I've seen anyone matching that description, Rhett lies smoothly. What's your interest in this woman? She's my intended bride, Whitmore says, as if that explains everything. There was a misunderstanding back home. She left before our wedding could take place. That's when Marilla emerges from the house, the shotgun in her hands, but not quite pointed at anyone yet. She's taken off her apron and smoothed her hair, composing herself into the image of a respectable ranch wife, rather than a fugitive. Is there a problem, husband? She asks, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. The word husband hits the 3 men like a physical blow. Whitmore's face goes through several interesting color changes, finally settling on a mottled red that suggests apoplexy isn't far away. Marilla, he says, and there's something ugly in his voice now. What is the meaning of this charade? No charade, she replies calmly. I'm Mrs. Rhett Calloway now, as of last week, legally married before witnesses and properly recorded with territorial authorities. Whitmore spurs his horse closer, his control finally slipping entirely. You think you can humiliate me like this? Disappear in the night like some common... That's as far as he gets before Rhett steps forward, his composure shifting into something considerably more dangerous. I'd be really careful about your next words, he says quietly. You're talking about my wife now. For a tense moment, violence hangs in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. But the shotgun in Marilla's hands and the unwavering calm in Rhett's stance apparently convince them that discretion is the better part of valor. This isn't over, Whitmore says, as he wheels his horse around. There will be legal consequences. Let there be, Rhett interrupts. But they'll have to go through territorial courts now. They ride away at a deliberate pace, and Rhett and Marilla watch until they disappear beyond the horizon. Thank you, she says simply, for standing with me. We're partners now, Rhett says. That means something. As the sun sets behind them, Marilla reaches out and takes his hand, not in a handshake this time, but simply holding it, her fingers intertwining with his. I came here for water, she says quietly. But I stayed because I found something else entirely, a husband worth choosing, rather than one chosen for me. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.